It was a May morning in Ouagadougou in 2025 when Ibrahim Traoré received a phone call that would change everything. Dr. Alon's Wedrago, his foreign minister, sounded visibly distraught. "Mr. President, we need to talk urgently, in person." At just 35, Ibrahim had learned to sense when something serious was happening. "Come to the palace immediately," he ordered. 15 minutes later, Wedrago entered the presidential office carrying a sealed folder. "Mr. President, our intelligence service has intercepted highly classified communications between Washington and American companies. What we have discovered is disturbing." Ibrahim opened the folder, his eyes widened. The documents revealed a secret American plan to destabilize African governments through economic operations disguised as humanitarian aid. "Is this true?" Ibrahim asked, incredulous. "Confirmed by 3 independent sources, sir. There are even recordings of meetings where Trump personally authorizes these operations." Ibrahim's blood boiled. For years, African leaders had suspected foreign manipulation, but never had concrete proof. "They are literally stealing our resources while pretending to help us," he murmured. Wedrago nodded gravely. "And there's more, sir. Burkina Faso is on the list of next targets." The young president stood up and walked to the window overlooking the streets of Ouagadougou. His people worked hard every day, trusting him to protect them. Now he discovered that the world's greatest power was secretly planning to sabotage their country. "Call an international press conference for this afternoon," Ibrahim said, his voice firm as steel. "It's time to expose the truth to the world." Word of Ibrahim Traoré's urgent press conference spread quickly through the global media community. Within hours, correspondents from major outlets began arriving in Ouagadougou. At the presidential palace, Ibrahim and his team worked tirelessly to prepare the most important presentation of his career. "We need irrefutable evidence," he told his intelligence chief, Colonel Sawato. "Documents, audio, everything authenticated." His wife, Ajara, entered the office with a cup of coffee. "Are you sure about this, Ibrahim?" Confronting the Americans directly could have serious consequences. Ibrahim took her hands in his. "If we do nothing, the consequences will be worse. They will continue to exploit Africa while pretending to be our friends." Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., it was 6 a.m. when Trump's aides received a briefing about the planned press conference. "Mr. President," said John Kelly as he entered the Oval Office, "Ibrahim Traoré has called an urgent international press conference. Our insiders suggest it may be about sensitive issues." Trump, sipping his morning coffee, shrugged. "Let him talk. What harm can a president of a country nobody knows about do?" But Kelly was worried. In recent weeks, there had been rumors of leaks of classified information. "Sir, maybe we should monitor this closely." Back in Burkina Faso, Ibrahim rehearsed his speech with utmost care. "Every word would be crucial. We can't sound aggressive," Wedrago advised. "We need to be firm, but clear." The sound system was tested 3 times. Simultaneous translators were in place. Cameras from all major global networks were setting up. Ibrahim knew that within hours, the entire world would be watching, and Trump had no idea that a bombshell revelation was about to explode. At 3 p.m. in Ouagadougou, Ibrahim Traoré and his team walked into the main hall of the presidential palace. More than 200 journalists from 47 countries filled the room. Live broadcasts had already begun across every continent. "Ladies and gentlemen of the international press," Ibrahim began, his voice clear and steady, "today I reveal information that will shock the world. Evidence of illegal and immoral practices by the United States in Africa." In Washington, it was 9 a.m. when Trump's aides burst into the Oval Office. "Mr. President, you need to see this now." Trump turned on the TV and saw Ibrahim on screen, looking calm and confident. "Is this young idiot trying to provoke me?" Trump grumbled. Ibrahim continued, "I have in my possession documents proving a systematic American plan to destabilize African governments through economic operations disguised as humanitarian aid." He displayed the first set of documents on the screen for the world to see. Trump choked on his coffee. Where did he get this? He shouted. Ibrahim did not pause. These are recordings of meetings inside the White House where President Trump himself authorizes what they call Operation African Control. The audio began to play. Trump's unmistakable voice echoed across the globe. "We need to keep these African countries dependent. Too much aid makes them independent. Then we lose control of their resources." The silence in the Ouagadougou hall was absolute. In Washington, Trump turned red with rage. How did this leak? Who was the traitor? Ibrahim pressed on. There are American companies involved in schemes to artificially inflate the prices of African commodities, forcing our nations to sell below fair value. Detailed documents appeared on the screen, with names of executives, amounts, and dates. They are stealing billions from us while pretending to help us with peanuts, Ibrahim declared. All over the world, journalists typed furiously. Social media exploded. #TrumpExposed began trending within minutes. In the Oval Office, Trump was frantic. He threw the remote at the wall, shouting obscenities. "This African kid will pay for this." His aides tried to calm him as Ibrahim's revelations continued, unstoppable. But the most shocking part was yet to come. Ibrahim stated on live TV, "There are plans to assassinate African leaders who do not cooperate with these schemes." Trump stopped yelling and turned pale. This information was top secret, known to only 5 people in the American government. Ibrahim revealed more documents, including a list of African presidents marked for neutralization. He looked directly into the cameras and said, "My name is on that list." The final bombshell had detonated. In Washington, phones rang non-stop. Members of Congress demanded answers. The American media scrambled for explanations as the world watched history unfold. In a frenzy, Trump called the CIA director directly. "How did this kid get top-secret information?" he demanded. "Mr. President, we are still investigating, but it appears we have a significant internal leak," came the nervous reply. "Find the traitor and destroy Traoré." Trump shouted, slamming the phone down so hard the receiver cracked. His mind raced, calculating the damage. These revelations could destroy his presidency. Ibrahim, unfazed, continued before the world's cameras. "I have emails here where American executives discuss how to keep Africa controlled and dependent. They talk about our countries as if they were their private farms. Around the globe, governments urgently demanded explanations from American ambassadors. The European Union called an emergency session. China immediately offered Ibrahim full support. Watching his presidency unravel in real time, Trump made a desperate decision. Prepare a military response. Let's show this kid who's boss." His aides exchanged stunned glances. The President of the United States was considering military action against Burkina Faso over a press conference. The situation had spun completely out of control. Ibrahim Traoré's revelations triggered a global political earthquake. In London, the British Prime Minister convened an emergency cabinet meeting. "These allegations are extremely serious. We need an immediate international investigation." In Paris, President Macron canceled all engagements to handle the crisis. If these reports are true, Western relations with Africa will never be the same. Meanwhile, behind closed doors in Washington, Trump huddled with his crisis cabinet. "Mr. President," the Secretary of State said carefully, "half the world is demanding our response." "How do we handle this? We deny everything," Trump roared. "These are fake documents, fake news, a communist conspiracy." But his inner circle knew the truth. The evidence was to detail, the voice recordings to reel to dismiss. Back in Burkina Faso, Ibrahim pressed on with his historic press conference. These practices are not only immoral, they are criminal. The United States has systematically violated African sovereignty for decades. He showed more proof: secret contracts, emails between American companies and corrupt local officials, and detailed plans for destabilization. They fund rebel groups, manipulate elections, sabotage our infrastructure, all to keep control over our natural resources. The United Nations called an emergency session. The Secretary General declared the revelations extremely troubling and demanded a full, independent investigation. In Washington, Democratic lawmakers called for Trump's immediate impeachment. If these allegations are true, this is the biggest scandal in American history, declared Nancy Pelosi on the steps of Congress. Realizing the gravity of the crisis, Trump reached for desperate measures. He called Putin personally. "Vladimir, I need your help. This African is trying to destroy me." On the other end, Putin chuckled. "Donald, maybe it's time you learned that the world has changed. Africa is no longer anyone's backyard." He hung up, leaving Trump fuming and alone. With his presidency collapsing, Trump made increasingly radical decisions. He summoned his top military commanders to a secret meeting. "I want Traoré eliminated." "I don't care how," he hissed, his voice shaking with fury. General Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, stared at him, shocked. "Mr. President, are you suggesting a political assassination outright?" Trump exploded. "I order it. This African brat has destroyed my presidency. He will pay for this." The generals in the room exchanged uneasy looks. They had never seen the president so unhinged. Meanwhile, in Ouagadougou, Ibrahim was receiving calls of support from across the globe. Pope Francis called personally. "President Traoré, your courage in exposing the truth is admirable. The Church supports your fight for justice." The Dalai Lama sent a message: "Truth always prevails over lies. Your revelations will liberate not only Africa but the world." In Beijing, Xi Jinping announced a $50 billion investment package for African countries that had suffered under American exploitation. Putin issued a similar statement, offering military protection to any African nation under threat. Watching his international isolation grow by the hour, Trump made a desperate live broadcast. All Ibrahim Traoré has shown is fake documents, fake news, a conspiracy to destroy America. He shouted into the camera, but his credibility was shattered. Even Republicans began to distance themselves. Senator Mitt Romney declared, "If this evidence is true, the president must resign immediately." In Burkina Faso, Ibrahim concluded his press conference with a bold, revolutionary proposal: "I call on all African countries to an emergency summit. It is time to create our own economic union, free from external manipulation." The audience erupted in a standing ovation. In just 24 hours, Ibrahim Traoré had become the most influential African leader in modern history. On the other side of the world, Trump was already plotting revenge. 3 days after the revelations, he secretly signed a classified executive order, Operation African Silence. Its goal was clear: neutralize Ibrahim Traoré by any means necessary. The CIA was ordered to mobilize every available resource. At CIA headquarters, Director Gina Haspel was deeply alarmed. "Mr. President, an operation against a legitimately elected head of state could have catastrophic consequences. I don't want excuses." Trump barked into the phone, "I want results." In Ouagadougou, Ibrahim knew danger was coming. His intelligence service had intercepted American communications suggesting an imminent threat. "Mr. President," said Colonel Sawato, "I recommend maximum security. The Americans are mobilizing resources against us." Ibrahim gave a weary, resolute smile. It was to be expected. When you expose the truth about the powerful, they react with violence. His wife, Ajara, pleaded with him, "Maybe we should leave the country temporarily." "To flee now would betray my people," Ibrahim replied firmly. "If I die defending the truth, so be it, but I will not hide." Meanwhile, CIA cells quietly infiltrated the Sahel. Operatives with forged identities slipped into Mali, Niger, and other neighboring states. The plan was complex: destabilize Burkina Faso by creating chaos along its borders, then slip in assassins under the cover of disorder. But Ibrahim had prepared for such tactics. Years of battling terrorists had taught him the playbook of unconventional warfare. "Strengthen border security," he ordered. "Any suspicious movement must be reported immediately." Back in Washington, Trump's political crisis deepened by the hour. In Congress, a commission of inquiry was formed to investigate Ibrahim's explosive revelations. The scandal threatened not only a presidency, but the entire reputation of American foreign policy in Africa. "We need the truth," declared Adam Schiff on national television. If the president is involved in crimes against sovereign nations, he must answer for it. But within a week of Ibrahim's revelations, the pressure on Trump became unbearable. Protests erupted across the country, with crowds outside the White House chanting "Trump the traitor." Inside the administration, chaos reigned. Several cabinet secretaries resigned, unable to defend the indefensible. Vice President Mike Pence was quietly considering invoking the 25th Amendment to remove Trump from office. "Mr. President," Pence said during a tense private meeting, "your obsession with Traoré is destroying our international credibility. Are you against me too?" Trump exploded, "You're all traitors." Meanwhile, in Burkina Faso, Ibrahim was gaining unexpected international protection. France discreetly sent an elite unit for joint exercises. China stationed training ships off the West African coast. Even Russia offered military advisors. "It's ironic," Wedrago remarked. "His revelations about American manipulation have now given us protection we never had before." But Ibrahim was focused on something even bigger: building a fully independent African Economic Confederation. "We don't just want to defend ourselves," he told his ministers. "We want to build a real alternative to the current system." Central banks in 23 African countries had already expressed interest in creating a common currency, one free from American or European influence. In Washington, Trump's aides tried a desperate last tactic: discrediting Ibrahim in the media. "Let's brand him a communist, a terrorist, whatever Stephen Miller suggested." But the attempt failed spectacularly. Ibrahim's evidence was airtight and his reputation soared. Journalists who tried to smear him were ridiculed even by their peers. With every option exhausted, Trump made a final, shocking decision. He would resign, but not before launching one last bitter attack on Ibrahim. On May 29, 2025, Trump called an unexpected press conference. His face was tense, his eyes bloodshot. "Effective immediately, I am resigning from the presidency of the United States," he announced hoarsely. "But first, let me be clear. Ibrahim Traoré is a dangerous terrorist who poses a global threat." The press room exploded with shouted questions. "Mr. Former President, do you have any evidence to support this accusation?" someone demanded. Trump did not answer. He turned and left the podium in silence. His last desperate attempt to smear Ibrahim had failed utterly. In Ouagadougou, Ibrahim watched the resignation broadcast beside Ajara. He shook his head. "I feel no joy in seeing an American president destroyed," he said quietly. "I feel pity. Power corrupts when it is not used wisely." Back in Washington, Mike Pence, now acting president, made a crucial move. He called Ibrahim personally. "President Traoré, on behalf of the United States, I apologize for the irresponsible actions of my predecessor." "Thank you, President Pence," Ibrahim replied diplomatically. I hope we can build a relationship based on mutual respect. Pence went further. I am authorizing a full investigation into the operations you have revealed. Any officials involved will be prosecuted, Acting President Pence promised Ibrahim during their call. Around the world, Trump's downfall was hailed as a victory for truth over lies. Newspapers ran bold headlines: Young African topples American president, truth wins, a new era in Africa-world relations. Ibrahim, however, kept his feet firmly on the ground. This is just the beginning, he told his cabinet. Now we must build a better future for Africa. 3 months later, 47 African countries signed the Ouagadougou Accords, creating the continent's largest economic union in history. Ibrahim was unanimously elected as the union's first rotating president. Meanwhile, Trump, exiled in Mar-a-Lago, watched the news with bitterness, fully aware that he had been defeated by a 35-year-old who had simply dared to tell the truth. 1 year after the revelations that shook the world, Ibrahim Traoré stood at the podium of the United Nations General Assembly in New York, now president of the African Economic Union. At just 36, he had become one of the most respected voices on the global stage. Ladies and gentlemen, he addressed the packed hall 1 year ago. I exposed the truth about the illegal practices that kept Africa in a subordinate position. Today, I present to you an Africa reborn, united and prosperous. The results spoke for themselves. The combined GDP of African countries had grown by 23% in a single year. Africa's new currency, the Afro, was becoming one of the most stable in the world. Investment in education and technology was at an all-time high. In Washington, the new administration worked to rebuild ties with Africa. Acting President Kamala Harris, who took over after Pence resigned amid scandals tied to the Trump era, had personally visited 10 African countries to apologize in person. Standing beside Ibrahim, she admitted candidly, "We made serious mistakes. But we are committed to building a partnership based on equality and mutual respect." Trump, meanwhile, was facing multiple criminal charges. Documents unsealed by the investigation confirmed every detail of Ibrahim's original revelations. Former officials testified about the illegal operations in Africa. Financially and politically ruined, the former president faded into disgrace. In Burkina Faso, the transformation was tangible. Ouagadougou had become an African technology hub. Leading European and Asian universities competed to open campuses there. The international airport expanded to handle thousands of new visitors each month. Through it all, Ibrahim remained humble. In an interview with the BBC, he said simply, "I didn't do anything extraordinary. I just decided the truth deserves to be known. The rest happened naturally." Ajara, now the United Nations Ambassador for African Affairs, smiled when asked about her husband. "He always says this," she laughed, "but he changed the world." On the 1-year anniversary of the revelations, a ceremony was held in Ouagadougou with 54 African heads of state in attendance. Standing before them, Ibrahim reflected on the journey. "We have proven that Africa does not need external saviors. We need respect, partnership, and the opportunity to show our potential." The truth, at last, had set an entire continent free.